in a
Yeah.
way. As far as Abyss, learning Abyss is like I go back and forth. I have always gone back and forth between like like push push using tranquility, push using singularity, or push using both, or have no opinion. And those are my like four choices. Like and
Hold on one second. I, my thing is showing me that I'm picking up his audio somehow on my mic. Is it sounding weird to anybody else to have Fonsui talking? Are you hearing like an echo or something? Yeah, or is it fine? Go ahead and say so.
is it sounding normal?
Well, it's just it's like it's picking up. Oh, well, you're low, but it looks like okay, it's fine. Everything's fine.
I
We're
can
fine.
okay, good. I can speak up too. So okay, it's coming through for stream. Actually, you know what? Hang on, I'll unmute stream and listen to myself.
Right. Well, the issue is that my mic appears to be picking something up, like it's picking up you talking too. So I was just wanting to make sure it wasn't like
Okay,
echoing
yeah,
through the system.
I just listened to it. Like I unmuted the stream because it's a few seconds delayed from what we're hearing in Discord, and it sounded
Fine.
okay.
Okay, great. All right.
It sounded like my normal crappy mic as opposed to like problematic.
Excellent. All right. So go on.
So those are like the four stances that I've gone between. One is have no opinion, one is push a balance, one is push yeah, I started speaking up. One is push singularity, one is push tranquility,
I turned them up.
primarily. So the thing that my thing about singularity is that in a way I feel like that's the purest form of the content. Like if you're doing it on singularity, you're there like because you have one reason and one reason only, or I guess two reasons. One is you want to get good, like you're there specifically to get good, and challenge yourself with the hardest, version of the content, and which is not necessarily practical to do repeatedly on tranquility. And the other is if you're doing science. So I feel like pushing that as the primary, uh, like that's the best way because you're definitely not doing it for the profit. You're not doing it to grind ISK. You're
Right.
doing it because you want to get good at it or because you enjoy it. It's one of those reasons. And if it's not that, it's science, which is a whole other thing. That's a separate issue. Um,
Just for everybody's clarification, when we say science, what we mean is basically experimenting, running experiments to see whether or
mhm.
not how the mechanics work, not just like whether or not a ship
Yeah,
works or anything like that, but like uh,
observing, recording data, testing certain scenarios,
right.
etc.
And so the reason why he's bringing that up is because one of the powers of singularity is the move me command. So what Fonsui does is he'll go into when you're trying to do actually research the effectiveness of a ship class or of a ship type a build. It's not enough to just go after any old site. You need to go after very specific configurations that you know are kind of the most extreme, the real risks out there. And so if you had to run every single site from start to finish in order to do it all, that takes a very long time. So rather than that, he specifically jumps in, sees whether or not it's the type of site that he needs, and if it isn't, he moves out and jumps again. So he's not doing it to avoid risk, he's doing it to explicitly get to the challenge or the exact type of instance that he's looking for
Yeah,
for
I
the
call it
test that he's
room
trying to
hunting.
conduct.
Spawn hunting or room hunting.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that just in case people
Hmm.
weren't aware.
Yeah, because you can use there are several commands you can use on Singularity that obviously are not allowed on Tranquility. One of them is /move me, and move me brings up a box with a bunch of buttons in it that move you to different solar systems immediately. So I just jump in. If it's not the room that I want to test, hit the button, jump out, and do another. Go start another site. Takes a
Right.
few seconds. So so that's science and that's separate. If a player is playing Abyss, like taking a ship or triple boxing or dual boxing or whatever, and going to the sites and trying to see, get practice and get better or learn the site or whatever it is, like that is the quote unquote purest form of the content because we know they're not doing it for ISK because you can't make ISK on Singularity. That doesn't, it doesn't exist on
Right.
Tranquility. So we know that they're just doing it for that. So either they just really enjoy it or they're trying to get better, and that's like the purest. But So I feel like pushing that as the best way, not like everyone must do this, but like if you want to do it the purest way, then that is the best way. But the reason I don't feel 100% comfortable pushing it is because it's not guaranteed to always be there. Now, it has been there since the start for like 6 months or a year or so, or maybe longer. The filaments weren't seeded. So you had to grind filaments yourself, or what I did is I kept a stack of 100 filaments of every single type on Tranquility that I
Right.
didn't use.
And then you can just
Those
copy
weren't
it.
the ones that I used. Yeah, so I know that I always had 100, so my Singularity mirror always had 100 of everything. So I could do my runs, or you'd have to grind it out.
Right.
And eventually they added the filaments. But the point is that Abyss has always been available, with seeded modules and chips and implants and drugs and all that stuff, and all the commands. It's always been available, but there's no guarantee, and it's not quote unquote the correct way to play the game. Like you can play on Singularity with Omega
Right.
if you don't have if you don't pay CCP a penny, like you don't have Omega through ISK and you don't have Omega through money, like you can play Omega on Singularity. So like I don't feel 100% comfortable pushing that as the quote unquote best. And that's the only reason. It's because it's unofficial.
Right.
If it was official, I would be like this. If there was like officially a test server, you get access to it by paying for Omega, like or something like that,
Yeah.
and it's all guaranteed to be there. Then I would be like, yeah, you should like if you were incredibly super serious about Abyss, either practice or just performance or whatever, then you would do it on Singularity and you would do it without caring about the money. But because it's unofficial, I don't feel comfortable saying that.
Right. Well, so I have a counter argument to that, but I also have a person in system with me, and Core Scanner broke
By the
out.
way, that is not to invalidate people who grind Abyss for money, because Abyss
Right.
is also really good for grinding for money. And like you can still learn to do that and get better at it by using Singularity, but you don't have to. Like you don't have to either way. That's just the thing that I like to push as the best way.
He's in a Helios. I don't have a scram on this Astero. He might be gone. Yeah, he's gone.
Optional PvP then.
All right. So here's my counter argument to that. You say that the only two reasons to do it is to get good or to
By
do
the way,
science.
I know that you said of something that I didn't address.
What?
You said that the risk, the heart pounding,
Well,
the adrenaline.
Well, that's
is
kind of my
and
argument
you're
here.
not wrong.
So
You're,
let me.
you're not wrong.
Right. So I would argue that that is not the reason why people do it on Singularity. Because, I mean, the science one is a solid argument because you have a capability of on Singularity that you don't have on Tranquility, which makes that a very valid reason. But here's the thing. You absolutely could do it on Tranquility. You could do it slowly and surely and work your way up using lower amounts. You could jump into it and just risk the death, whatever. So the only reason to do it on Singularity is to give you a little bit of a cushion to make it feel okay for you because you're not actually risking anything as you learn, right? So it's risk avoidance. Not necessarily a bad one, but that's why you would do it on Singularity over Tranquility. The problem with that is that gaining confidence in your own ability to do it is only kind of half the problem. Or more importantly, simply completing it on Singularity may not actually accomplish that task. So I would be concerned about someone who would like get into Singularity on its own and then not make the transition away because simply being able to do it on Tranquility does not give them confidence that they'll be lucky enough or that things won't go wrong on Tranquility.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and you're not wrong.
So I would much rather, from the very beginning, teach people that embracing the nature of it is part of the thing.
So the key to what you're saying there that I agree with is that they may never graduate,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And if and that's where my if comes in. If Singularity was official and part of and access to it was granted by Omega, right? By actually getting Omega for real, then I would say it's okay if they never graduate because this is a completely valid way to access this content indefinitely. But because it's unofficial, it's only a stepping stone. It cannot be the end goal. So if they and so because it's unofficial and because people may choose to not graduate, I'm stranding people by telling them to go there first.
No, he's not suggesting that Sissy should be gated to Omega only. He's saying that that would make the difference. So he's not
Yeah,
suggesting that this
maybe.
is something that should be done, but rather if you
Yeah, yeah.
wanted to, if it was to be done, then it would have this impact, or rather, it can't be this way unless it was done,
Right.
which is
And
fine.
I think that that could be done piecemeal, as in certain access to certain things on Singularity can be behind Omega. I think that that's a practical solution.
Have you played XCOM?
I haven't. I've always been
Okay,
about to play XCOM.
so XCOM is a strategy game in which you play as a force of humans against the alien invasion. And one of the main mechanics of XCOM is that there's permadeath, right? So you've got your crew, and if anything happens to them, then they're dead, and you just kind of have to keep playing on with the story. Well, the problem with that is that it led to players being very conservative about how they played, very defensive. Hold back and let the aliens come in and make the first move, rather than being aggressive. Now, the issue is that that behavior is absolutely expected given the conditions. It is objectively the correct move, but it's not as fun. So, in XCOM 2, they put they put a lot more objectives deep in with timed events or other pressures where you couldn't just sit back. So they
Where turtling
arbitrarily
was not the answer.
what? Well, they arbitrarily
They
forced the
yeah they
player
made yeah they
to
made turtling not the answer.
exactly. So they arbitrarily forced players to play in a different way, and a way that is against their instinct, because they're forcing them to play the game in a way that is more fun. Right? It's like the kid that bitches and moans before he goes to summer camp and then doesn't want to go home at the end of it, right? So my concern is that the person in the moment that is just doing the
That's
abyss
an Alan Sherman song, by the way.
isn't making isn't going to be making a rational decision about how they're managing that risk. They're just going to feel that this is easy enough and this is good enough. And if that's valid gameplay, yeah, sure, it's valid gameplay. But I think that every mechanic needs to encourage them to move over and do it with more excitement. Otherwise, if the real problem is the permadeath nature of it, if the permadeath nature is not adding something to the mechanic, then it should just be removed from the abyss. It's not, and therefore I think it adds something.
Yes. So, a couple things. First and foremost, there's a point that I actually failed to make earlier, and that's that when I'm on Singularity, it's not just that it's more convenient. It's that there are things that I simply cannot do.
Hold on, one
On
real quick.
yeah,
4Killa asks, if you're an alpha on TQ, can you have access to Omega skills on Sissy? Valamir says no.
yeah.
The way you can
No,
do
you
it
can.
is that you can just get the Plex on Sissy for basically nothing, and then activate your account on Sissy, and now you have Omega on
Yeah,
Sissy.
you can buy Omega on Singularity because everything, including Plex, on Singularity is seated on the market for 100 ISK. So you
Yeah.
can just buy as much Plex as you want on Singularity and buy Omega with it. You can also buy as many extractors off the New Eden store as you want. So every 2 weeks, you're allowed to copy all of your skill points from Tranquility to Singularity with the command /copy skills. Once you use it, you can't use that command again for 2 weeks. And what that does is that takes everything that you have on Tranquility and it gives it to you on Singularity, in addition to whatever else you have. So what you can do is you copy skills. What do you mean Plex is not cheap?
On
Plex is
Sissy, it
100x.
is. On
Yeah, on
Singularity, the
Singularity.
test server, it is.
Yeah, like I thought that was clear. Um, so what you can do with your skills on Singularity is every mirror, which happens every few months, they will copy Tranquility and your current state and reset Singularity every few months. But in between those times, you can game the system on Singularity and get a lot of skill points.
Right.
And the way you do that is the first thing you do is you extract everything. First, you extract everything you have. You use it using, free Plex, 100 disk Plex, buy extractors from the Eden store, burn the character down to nothing. And then you re-inject all that SP and leave it unallocated. And then and then in 2 weeks, you can type /copy skills and it'll restore everything that you had. And then you can do it again. And you do the same thing again and again and again and just keep banking all the unallocated SP. And you'll just get, so if you have 40 million, then every 2 weeks you'll get 40 million more.
Wait.
Every single 2 weeks.
So when they copy skills, it doesn't copy over how much unallocated SP you have?
No, it just copies your skills.
Wow, I did not realize that.
And what it does is it doesn't actually copy skills. It grants you the skills that you have on Tranquility directly. It says you now have these precise skills. So it doesn't take away the other skills that you have.
Oh,
and it
weird.
doesn't touch your unallocated SP.
Okay.
So yeah, so you could have like a pure mining and industry character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can extract it and burn it down to 0, put all those skill points into combat SP.
Right.
And then in 2 weeks, type /copy skills, you'll keep the combat SP you trained, but it'll restore all of the mining SP and industry SP that you ripped out 2 weeks ago.
That's really interesting.
So don't sell skill injectors. Skill injectors are currency on Singularity because that's the only thing that's not seeded on there. There are very few things that are not seeded on the market. Injectors are not seeded. This is the only way to get SP. What I described is the only way to get SP on Singularity.
And participating in Singularity events.
Yeah. But like, there's no like super cheese.
I'm in the wrong place, obviously.
Oops. Yeah, there's no super cheese way to get SP on Singularity better than extract and copy every 2 weeks. Anyway, so the point that I was making before I went off on this tangent was that I can do things on Singularity. They're impractical entirely on Tranquility. Like, for instance, I can do dumb stuff. I can test this ship build. It's like, does this ship build work with this tactic or strategy? And I can have absolutely no guarantees that it will work, and I can die constantly. And like, you simply cannot do that kind. Like, you can't take those risks and do that kind of science on Tranquility. You can't. Like, you can do that once every couple of months, and it's expensive, and you have to grind and whatever. And like, I'm not interested in that. I just want to see if the thing works.
I've never heard of these guys before.
So that's like one thing that is important, and the other. So like, I simply cannot test that same way. You can't throw yourself at the content on live server like you can on test server. You just can't.
Right.
Secondarily, as far as that adrenaline and the risk being an intrinsic part, again, that comes back to the official nature or the unofficial nature of Singularity. I don't think it's a required component. I think it adds. I think that the heart pounding and the risk and all that is 100% adds to it. There is no doubt. But not everyone wants that, and not everyone needs that for the learning process, right? Like I would want that. Like I would want to graduate to that. I wouldn't want to start out with that. But again, because Singularity is not official, I feel like by directing people there primarily, I could be stranding them.
I would argue that managing your own risk aversion and tackling that problem with the risk in place is its own lesson, which is just as important to, calibrating a person or acclimating a person to EVE Online as the actual piloting is.
I think that's what the difference is. I think that if I'm dealing with an existing player who knows nothing about Abyss or even PvE, but like they're a good player, then I would just tell them to go straight to Singularity. But I think for new players, that is not the answer.
I don't think that it's wrong necessarily, but I generally avoid suggesting Singularity unless I get pushback, because I don't want to give a person an easy out if they weren't going to need it, right?
Right, yeah.
If somebody's willing to do it on Tranquility, I consider that the superior option. Now, there could be a case to be made that forcing people to do it that way, and in this case, I mean, by not communicating the alternative is a way of forcing them to do it, you're leading to a higher chance of failure, where in Singularity, it's easier to pick yourself up and dust yourself off. If I convince them to do it on Tranquility, there's more of a chance of a negative event having a really negative impact on the person and him giving up.
So I think where I'm landing is to be clear, until now I was landing on I wish that I could recommend Singularity first, but I can't because of its unofficial status. That was like my stance until now. But I think there is a demographic that I can appropriately recommend to go directly to Singularity. And I think it's a small demographic, and I'd have to like look out for it when those people talk to me.
Right.
But there is the sort of player that that's good for, and I have to keep my eye open for that.
Yeah. So I used to be I worked for Vector Marketing for a period of time selling Cutco cutlery. And one of the things that they teach you is you present forward kind of the deal that you want them to take first. And you don't present any other options. You don't even suggest that there are other options. And then when they push back against that for one reason or another, then you respond with an alternative option that you have in your back pocket that answers whatever problem that they had, right? So like we could offer...
Sounds like haggling 101.
Absolutely. We could offer up to 10% discount, but that directly came out of our cut of the money, and therefore we're encouraged to not.
This is structured haggling.
Right.
Codified haggling.
Exactly. So in the same regard, I personally would like to present the quote unquote correct way to do it, which is, working your way up in Tranquility and the caution that teaches, and only offer the easy out if they show that is a barrier to entry that will prevent them from doing it. Now, the counter argument to this is actually Marcus, who was in here earlier, where one of the things that I expound all the time is you want to make the entry level as simple as possible, right? The idea that somebody may never transition over to Tranquility ends up being a very poor argument as to why somebody shouldn't do it. Because the idea is that if you can just get them to start doing it, then they will take the next step and take the next step and take the next step. The idea that somebody wouldn't, once they get good at the Abyss on Singularity, that they wouldn't transition to Tranquility is somewhat absurd. And like I said, Marcus is a great example of this. At no point did we give him any pressure to take the next step. And yet, he apparently is flying as a Nitra now. Is a skirmish commander for Goonswarm, which is something he would have none of us would have expected when we first started that journey.
So I think that the demographic that I'm looking for the ones that I would direct to Singularity first are people that do not need at all to learn how to fly.
Mm.
If I start talking to someone and it's clear that they know how to fly, and I don't know what they know how to fly specifically necessarily, but like they get the mechanics generally, they understand how guns work and why this matters or whatever. And like if I get someone that's like a pretty decent pilot, then I don't have to worry about the learning to fly aspect of Abyss, and I could just send them directly to Singularity
Right.
to the high end content. And again, it's not every single player. It's just like that's the demographic that I'm looking for, and it's a case by case basis. But as a general rule, that's not where I'm going to start people off, and it hasn't been where I start people off.
What I find interesting about that particular strategy is that feeds on a totally different notion, and I like it because basically, if you're telling an experienced pilot, oh no, you go ahead and take the safe path of going to Singularity and doing it, that might just be enough for them like it's reverse psychology, right? They're like, wait, I don't need the safe way of doing it, and then they go and do it on Tranquility.
I mean, either way, but like
they'll be insulted by your
some have
presumption.
I have gotten that reaction before.
Well, then go ahead and do it on Tranquility then.
Yeah. So I've gotten the poo-poo, I've gotten the like, oh, that's not real, that's not risk, that macho.
Right. I get that about the Abyss in general, for sure.
Right, yeah, that's true. Like, there's always, you know what, at every level, there's always a fucking gatekeeper, right? At every level.
Yeah.
Someone's always gatekeeping, and that's, by the way, like this lesson has been taught to me again and again, and what I've noticed is that like if there's no one gatekeeping and like people are still not doing it, then maybe it's you. So I have found myself to be the problem before and fixed it, hopefully.
Well, I think everybody's the problem sometime. Everybody's the problem sometimes, and so the skill of identifying when you're the problem or how you're the problem is not weakness, but rather a strength that everybody has.
That's a strength that I have.
Or to put it a different way, if you're not at least occasionally sorting out why you're wrong and correcting it, then you're just being wrong without noticing it. Right? Like it's not that you're doing it so much better than everybody else or whatever. It's that you're just not paying attention to what wrong you're doing. It's a Dunn-Kruger, right? Like,
yeah.
Hey, Art Gravy. Hold up. Oh yeah, the alert box is working. Why am I not hearing it? Huh. Glorification of the fit, mortification of the unfit. You, sir, Art Gravy, are glorified. How's it going? We were just talking about the Abyss and how people get into it and its application on Singularity, both for learning the Abyss and performing experiments within the Abyss. How was your stream, by the way? And Hobby Dungeon's here too. All of the streamers, go ahead and give us a wave. Why doesn't Art Gravy have a VIP? VIP. Art Gravy. Make sure to give them all a follow. If you have an 07, if you got somebody with an 07, give them give the 07 in chat right now. Let's celebrate all of our streamers. I at least have a few. It's harder for me to pull them all up. Go ahead and click on the 07s that are coming up. All of these 07s are coming from good streamers. Check them all out.
That's a whole bunch of 07s, actually.
Yeah. Oh, I've been going around and promoting that for a long time because I think it's a cool idea. Everybody should have their own 07.
Everybody has an 07.
Yeah, you got to collect the whole set. And it also, so the thing I really like about it is that when somebody posts an emote from somebody else, you can actually click on that emote to like directly just straight up go and follow and or
Yeah,
third person.
that's 7 different ones on screen right now.
And Wolvengar, thank you for joining us. Yeah,
Technically 8.
we are all about all of the Eve streamers around here. So I think that the biggest thing is that like the moral of the story here is that whatever it takes to get people to do it, right? Like ultimately,
right, yeah. At the end of the day, whatever the barrier is that's making them say I'm just not going to do this content. So like that's what they should do. Like you know, I don't ever want to like gatekeep someone out of doing the content. Period.
Right.
So that's certainly case by case. Like feel everything out. But I think that the general recommendation is start at tier 0 or tier 1 if you in any way need to learn how to fly. If you really do know how to fly already, you don't have to be like an AT pilot, but like if you just know how to fly, then you can choose to start at the higher tiers risk free on Singularity to learn the content as opposed to learning how to fly. Because that's the thing. Like I always try to separate out those two separate aspects of Abyss, learning aspects. One is the learning to fly, the learning mechanics, the learning all general piloting and all that, separate from learning this content, right?
Right.
And I think that's what Singularity could be for. It's more for learning this content.
That's fair. I think it's very useful, especially if you're going to be an experienced person on Singularity an experienced person in the Abyss using Singularity to test out a new like fancy build is probably pretty good too. Like, you know, if I'm going to buy,
that's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah,
I'm talking about like introducing someone to Abyss.
Yeah. I think that it is definitely worth at least informing people that they have the option, because that's the less obvious route, right?
Yeah, and I've gotten as you said, mixed results. Like sometimes I get disdain, like for Singularity, like that's not impressive or cool or hard or risky or whatever. I get sometimes distrust, as in it like I can't trust the Singularity works the same way as Tranquility. That's more uncommon, but I get it sometimes from people. And then there's that's an awesome freaking idea. And then the last one is I can't be bothered.
Right. Yeah. Often there's some sort of excuse or something like that's really happening. And so when you offer a solution to whatever problem they present, they just wave it off because really they just don't want to do it.
Right. So those are the different reactions that I get. And I'm not sure which is the most common, but I think that the distrust is the least common and the most frustrating.
Yeah. It's interesting because like our relationship with Singularity has evolved over the years. And for a long time, I think that there's a lot of negative stigma built up on Singularity because of that attitude of the fact that it's not real. The idea that like Eve is fundamental about its risk, and therefore risk avoidance is seen as being pretty negative. It's the same energy that gets people to like hate on HiSec, for example. They feel like they're not playing the game at full cylinders. And so like if somebody gets into playing on Singularity, then that takes them out of the sandbox, out of the ecosystem. Which, I mean, there's some argument to that. But again, I think that it's very possible that fear is wildly overrated. Like the idea that somebody would play Eve and do it, like have their time solely be on Singularity. So, like, first of all, that player is not, if they didn't have the option of Singularity, going to go and do super risky things on Tranquility, right? Like that player is not going to do that. In fact, that the fact that they can play it on Singularity may be the only thing that's making them play EVE Online at all. I just like, especially with given how obsessed everybody is with ISK, I would find it shocking that somebody would quote unquote waste their time on Tranquility past a certain point, or sorry, on Singularity past a certain point to get into the Abyss. Yeah.
I would say that like in terms of the gatekeeping versus accessibility aspect of EVE Online in general and Abyss specifically, like I'm definitely on the side of whatever gets you in, you
Right.
know? Like I'm not going to hate on whatever gets someone in the community or whatever gets someone in this content. And and they can graduate if and when they feel like it.
And that's why I was thinking about during the Doctor Who event, I was suggesting that what they should do is a new type of thing, like a new type of mission, where they give you the ship. Like, here is the Abyss cruiser, fully fit. This is the one you have to use for this event or for this mission. And the reward is, if you succeed in the mission, you keep the ship. So now the risk has been taken away from you and the reward is clear. And you end up with something that you already know that you can use. I think that that might be a cool idea, but obviously that might be tricky to implement.